Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. We are playing through version 1.00 of the Japanese release, and last time we defeated all the last obstacles that stand in our way at Byrgenwerth. We were confronted by the sort of final mystery to put together of how to access the Byrgenwerth spider, what's going on with the lake by the moon viewing platform, the Lunarium, and we met Master Willem, a living legend, and then we killed him. We did so for good reason. It's because it's the only way, I think, outside of the chalices, I could be wrong about this, certainly the easiest way to get an eye rune, and pretty high level eye rune. And the eye rune is also potentially important in terms of the lore that we get. So this time, I think it makes sense to sort of start out with that, and then as we've gained more eyes and more insight, we'll be able to sort of penetrate into the mysteries of the world by defeating the Byrgenwerth spider. Anyway, let's bring things back to the eye rune here. Eye, very straightforward. It's just eye. I mean, I think maybe like this kanji could also mean like the pupil, but I think it's just generally used to mean eye, and it makes sense that it's eye. If you look at the image, you can see inside the star, which star is the symbol for arcane, right? If you look down at our stats, right, I have 40 arcane, and it's represented in the little box by a star. And so you have what looks like an eye inside of a star, right? So it's an arcane eye, right? It's not just any eye. So it sort of makes sense that this is a rune that you have memorized in your head. It's a form of insight, maybe, right? To get back to the pun that I was talking about in the last episode. And as for what it does, let's go for the description here. All right, appropriately enough, this is what I call one of Carol's runes. So we have sort of the standard opener here. One of the secret letters left by copyist Carol, student of Byrgenwerth. So, of course, it makes sense that Byrgenwerth would have access to this rune because they're the ones that sort of kicked off this whole arcane contact thing, and Master Willem wants eyes, and unlike one of the sort of implications of one of the official translations, it's entirely possible that Willem of Byrgenwerth and Carol were contemporaries, right? They might have known each other. That's not sort of excluded by implication in Japanese the way that it is in English. So that's one interesting possibility to consider here. And let's continue on. Okay, so that, right, presumably the rune, that is one of the secret letters left behind by copyist Carol, student of Byrgenwerth, is a representation of the voice of, I'm going to say, the abandoned Great One. And, right, the second line ends with de, which in this case is used as a bridge between sentences and therefore is going to and. But I want to stop there because there's a reason I said I'm making a little bit of a leap to say the abandoned Great One. Because it could just be an abandoned Great One. It could be abandoned Great Ones, plural. However, let's go over, I think it's just under consumables. I used to have it equipped, but here we are, Augur of Ebrietas, and we're going to see it's the second line in the second section of text, third line of text overall, right? The abandoned Great One, Ebrietas, right? And it's the exact same Japanese phrasing, misterareta joisha, except we're getting a comma and then ebrietas to give you the idea that it's Ebrietas, right? And I think the abandoned Great One, Ebrietas, is the same as the abandoned Great One that we get in the eye rune. So I think this is the voice of the abandoned Great One, Ebrietas, transcribed. This could be still further evidence, right? You know, my like theory that involves a different interpretation. I'm not the only one who came up with this theory. I think Last Protagonist, I think, is the first person to sort of put forward this interpretation. I think it works with the Japanese. I'm not entirely sure it's what they meant, but it works really well, right? So you have this idea of this party, this group of scholars from Byrgenwerth that went down into the underground ruins, and they encountered the Eldritch Truth, and Carol, it seems, heard the voice of Ebrietas. This is why I think Carol was part of the group, right? I think it was Master Willem, his two servants, and Carol, and possibly more, right? There was this party from Byrgenwerth that went down into the underground ruins, encountered Ebrietas, and that's what kicked off the search for the cosmos in the underground labyrinth, right? We were reading that in another description. I forget which one off the top of my head. Maybe it was like maybe the pearl slug or the auger of Ebrietas, right? This idea of contact with Ebrietas, right? And we're getting further sort of confirmation of that with what's going on here with the eye rune. Now, it doesn't have to be that, right? There are other ways that you can interpret this, right? You can interpret this as Ebrietas having sway over the minds of the Byrgenwerth scholars, or like maybe Carol heard the voice of the Great One in his dreams. I don't know. But I like the idea, like I've said before, that there was this party of scholars that went down into the labyrinth, and some of the people went insane, and Master Willem was like totally changed from that point on, and they all started saying, okay, we need to go down here, like we found these beings down here and they're as gods, and we need to, right, figure out what's going on with the cosmos by going into these underground ruins, right, the tomb of the gods. And meanwhile, Carol is transcribing this rune in the background. And they pick up, a couple of the sort of beings that are linked with it, right? The phantasms. Okay, let's go on to the final round, because I stopped a little bit early, right? So this is a transcription of the voice of the abandoned Great One, and given the meaning of I, it brings about, I want to say greater, it brings about further discoveries. It doesn't have to be greater, it could just be further, right? Saranaru, like in additional discoveries. Okay, and then that's the whole first section there. The second section, I, the rune, because it's in quotation marks, also is a symbol of the, I want to say, investigation that schoolhead Willem pursued. He despaired at the state of human thought and aimed at higher dimensional thought beings. Aimed at the level of higher dimensional thought beings, right? Taru it's always a little bit of a brain bender for me in terms of grammar, right? Like, sought to be worthy, I guess, on the level of, I think I said something like that before, right? Of one that thinks on a higher dimension. So it's a little bit, right? It's the idea is he wants to elevate his thoughts, I think might come into the official translation. I can't remember exactly. But the idea is that there are these beings of higher dimensional thoughts, and he wants to become one of them. All right, and then final line here. He wanted, in his own head, inside his brain, an eye or eyes of thought. Right? And this sort of ties in with the idea that he was talking about before, right? What we need are more eyes. Eyes on the inside, right? And the reason this rune is sort of an arcane eye, right? This is an internal eye, like I was saying, like back in the setup, right? And it brings about additional discoveries, right? The actual effect is it raises your discovery stat, which makes you more likely to find items. So that's like the gameplay aspect of this coming into play. But I think the idea is that you're more likely to see like into the truth of the world. Interesting sort of mechanical expression of that. But I do think that like the most interesting section from the lore thing here is if you're thinking of this idea of this group of Byrgenwerth scholars that are descending into the labyrinth and actually making contact with Ebrietas, which touches off this whole thing. And like that's cool. We're also getting like the final pieces, right? There's a lot of puzzle pieces that this rune description, I think, helps connect, because we're getting further confirmation of eyes on the inside, right? Elevating his thoughts, right? All these things where Master Willem wants insight. He wants higher thoughts, and he wants people to be wary of blood, right? And he doesn't believe in that as sort of a means of elevation. He wants this sort of thing. He wants insight. He wants eyes on the inside, whatever that means. So having, bearing that in mind, it's time that we brought people face to face with the truths of the world around them, I think. We're going to head back. We're going to go back to Byrgenwerth, and we're going to take on the Byrgenwerth spider. Right, here we are. Oh man, I'm so happy to have gotten through all that dense lore stuff in the last episode. And now I can just fight the next boss. I've already given the name away. I don't know why I'm avoiding it, but I am. Here we go. I guess we're going to get the reveal of the name. I don't know if you caught it, by the way, but there are some enemies that jump down from this place, right? They're supposed to ambush you when you're on the ground. But thankfully, for people who are running back to fight the boss over and over again, you never have to fight them up here, because they're just programmed to, like, jump off this ledge here immediately. Anyway, we're going to jump off the ledge ourselves. We're going to penetrate the arcane mystery of the barrier of water. Here we are. Lake Before the Moon is the name of this location, literally. Moonside Lake, much better name, right? Moonside Lake is the official translation. Sounds very cool. And here we have the Byrgenwerth spider. Just hanging out, not really doing anything. And this is an interesting aspect of Bloodborne, right? Because we need to stop this spider from hiding the truth of the world if we ever want to complete our hunt. But there's sort of a casualty, right? There's this nature, this element of tragedy to this fight, because there's, as far as we know, nothing truly, like, evil about this being. It's not hostile. It's just existing, and somehow, probably just by the nature of its existence, because it's unclear otherwise how it would actively be doing this, it's preventing the truths of the world, the rituals that are happening, is preventing the full effects of those from being manifest in the world. So nobody truly knows what the state of reality is right now. So it has to die in order for these things to be revealed. But in a sense, that's just a tragedy. And because of the nature of how hidden the logic behind this quest is, I don't think the tragedy is very clear. It took me, right, like, it took me a lot of time thinking through the lore, watching other videos, putting things together, looking at the Japanese, and it was only after I'd done a lot of work on the game that I came to the conclusion that this tragic story, this, like, fight that doesn't really need to happen, that's about to happen, needs to take place. And we're, like, stuck in a world, I think I talked about this a little bit before, like, fairly early on in the series, the tragedy of only being able to swing your sword. What is there really no other way except for us to fight in order to reveal the truth of this world? I mean, ultimately, there is no other way, right? That's how you progress through the game. But at the same time, you're sort of confronted with the tragedy of that act. Once you know what the reasoning is behind why this has to happen, and you see what this creature is like. There's nothing, I don't think, malicious about Rom, the Vacuous spider. And this is why I say this fight can take a while, because these enemies spawn into the fight all around Rom, and, head-on is not the way to fight them. Uh-oh. Standing in place and getting mobbed is also not the way to fight them. They try and pick them off. Okay. Well, I was actually better positioned than I thought. I like to deal with all the little spiders and then focus on Rom once those are taken care of. But yeah, it's an interesting side effect of the obscurity of Bloodborne, right? As much as I was saying, they want you to solve this mystery, the whole point is this is supposed to be an exploration of the unknown. You need to go into the lake. They don't want to give you a ton of context necessarily. But there are all these great reasons to keep this storyline hidden, to keep this story beat hidden. But it does sort of rob it of some of its emotional power, right? The obscure nature of this quest makes it less affecting, which is interesting. There are other fights in Soulsborne where it's a lot more obvious that you know, it's a tragedy of a fight that you're walking into. But this is not one of those situations. Uh-oh. Yeah, normally when I just run, I'm safe from those meteors. As I will hopefully demonstrate now. Oh, nope. As I failed to demonstrate. Interesting. Well, that's going to make this harder. I'll just do, like, regular dodges, I suppose. I could focus entirely on Rom. There we go. The dodges are working pretty well. But again, I don't particularly like to do that. Did I get close enough? If I get close enough, we'll switch away from the sort of meteor attack to a more close range thing. No, nope, still throwing meteors. But we're almost through the spiders. Okay. Uh-oh. Oh, that wasn't too bad. Alright, anyway, now that I'm getting in close here, we might see some... Nope, I did enough damage to the boss. We didn't get to see the alternate attack patterns. We'll probably get to see them this time. Here with another large batch of spiders. And here come... Nope. Couldn't dodge them effectively. Come more meteors. Oh boy. I was in a more dangerous position than I realized. Uh-oh. There's another attack pattern for you. I was close enough to Rom. Boy, I'm glad I've been through the chalices. I mean, I did have to fight another version of Rom in the chalices, so... rolled right into that one. Great. Fantastic. Nope. Well, it worked. Okay, and I was close enough to get an AoE style attack. That's good. The meteor swarm is the most annoying attack from Rom. I haven't really talked about the boss name. The boss name... So the Japanese is sort of... the English is Rom the Vacuous Spider. The Japanese is a word for idiot that is a little bit obscure. And also, I think, something of a slur. It's been a little while since I've done the research on that. Certainly not the, like, everyday term that you would use for idiot. But it does get used in that sense. And that's modifying spider, right? So Rom the Idiot Spider would be one way to translate this. I think Vacuous works really well. And, of course, as a reflection of the obscure... I should have dodged further away. As a reflection of the obscurity of the Japanese term. Wow, that was fun. But without any spiders, Rom herself is not going to present that big of an obstacle. Alright, here we go. This time I'll actually get far enough away. Alright, you're dead. There it is! Boy, that Beast Claw did pretty well. I was a little worried, but it worked out. Of course, we get the Rain of Blood. But we're still here. And here's this figure. Right? The strangeness hasn't stopped. Strangeness is really just sort of getting started. Also, remember, look at this. This is a ghostly figure. And I wanted to pay attention to this because I've just come out in real time with an episode on the ghosts of Canehurst. And I talked about how they're sort of translucent some of the time, and their hands are bound. And here we have a figure who is translucent. We're going to see she's a female. And I don't know if her hands are bound in this form. But this is Queen Yharnam over here. If you haven't finished your Chalice Dungeoneering, it's a total mystery who this is. But this... we can find this same person down in the Chalice Dungeons. And there it is. The truths of the world have been laid bare. There's the amygdala that we couldn't see before. And notably, this one is still here. I wasn't sure, I think, earlier, but this amygdala is still here, the one that sends us to the place that is connected to the Nightmare Frontier. And that's interesting, because it means that this wasn't necessarily the god that Patches meant to sacrifice us to? Anyway, it just makes Patch's storyline even less understandable. But I probably shouldn't be focused on that. We also have to be focused on, we're now hearing a baby's cry, and we saw in the Moonside Lake a very, close overbearing, giant red moon, right? And so this is getting at the idea, right? The red moon has been hidden this entire time by the presence of the Byrgenwerth spider. So now that's been revealed, and I'm going to go out in a moment and we'll see what's going on. It's not just the amygdala that's been revealed. This is another one of the things that was hidden, apparently, by the Byrgenwerth spider. No longer hidden. And also, we get this note. This is one of the only times that this note doesn't really come from anywhere, right? It's not in quotation marks, so it doesn't seem to be being spoken by anything. We're not reading anything off the ground. It's just a note that we get from playing the game. This is knowledge, I guess, teleported directly into our brains. I don't know how you make sense of this from a literal perspective, or from a in-world perspective. The other thing to note, the door directly in front of us that used to be closed, because if we tried to run past this amygdala before, we'd run into a locked, closed door. It's now open. And the mystery note that we have here says, the concealment of the ritual has been broken, right? So this is sort of confirmation. The Byrgenwerth spider, which was concealing all rituals, the ritual in question that was being concealed, that concealment has now been broken. So it all sort of lines up, right? We needed to defeat the Byrgenwerth spider, right? The Byrgenwerth spider was hiding all manner of rituals. We needed to reveal the ritual in order to stop the ritual. And now we've defeated the Byrgenwerth spider. The ritual's concealment has been broken. And we get a new charge. It just says, search for the Nightmare Baby. I think find the Nightmare Newborn is the official translation. Sounds much better. The idea is that there is a baby, and I'm going to use a little bit of advanced knowledge here and say in a nightmare that we need to find. And I can't remember if we've read this note already and didn't have the context for it. I think probably we did. But there's a note that we could have had access to before, that we will have access to again, that talks of a ritual in a nightmare that's together with a baby. And we need to find the baby and silence its cry. And we can hear its cry right now, right? And so again, we're getting there's this bleed through, right? Dreams and reality are crossing over with one another. And another thing to note about, right, true enlightenment need not be shared. I was talking about that in the last episode. One thing that you can get if you have sent people to Erden Chapel so that the NPCs are actually alive at this point, you can interact with them and you can note that everyone's losing their mind. Now we're going to do this to a certain extent and we'll see it in this episode, but not to the same extent that you get if you send people to Erden Chapel. Because I think sort of as you get a visual implication, this giant red moon bearing down on you, and then you can't take it anymore and you find yourself somewhere else. I think the idea is that the human brain sort of can't handle this sort of strain, this sort of penetration of the nightmare realms into reality, and the revelation of all these arcane mysteries, these amygdala, that are all over the place, as we'll see. It's not just this one, There are a bunch that are around, that have been around the entire time, that are now visible, that weren't before. But also one more aspect of what's going on here. Look at where we are. We're in that strange, I want to say like bathtub, that we noted before when we came in here and then got teleported away. And this is one of the most mysterious aspects of the game. This like silver platter that looks like maybe it could hold water. And we do get a little bit more in terms of its relation, but it seems to have some sort of ritual significance, right? And we somehow got teleported from whatever the Moonside Lake was to here. How? That doesn't make any sense. It's totally unclear. This is just a really abrupt, strange part of the game that seems to run on dream logic, right? We just suddenly pop up here. Now, maybe this thing here is meant to symbolize water, right? Because what's the predominant situation we were in the Moonside Lake? Just a silvery, rippling reflection that is its own sort of realm. And what is the Moonside Lake? It's underneath the lake, but it's its own space that you run around in like air, and you're on top of shimmering waters? Did we cross a barrier into a nightmare? Like a nightmare realm? That seems like the most ready explanation, because you have the nightmare realms of Bloodborne, and we're tied to the dream, so it certainly makes sense that we could access it. Does that mean other people couldn't access? How did Master Willem hide it? Is it possible that Rom's ascension to becoming a great one, right? The reason I think that Rom is called the Vacuous Spider is that Rom was sort of a failed attempt at ascension to becoming a great one. And possibly that's the reason we have the Nightmare lecture building adrift in the Nightmare, right? Because we have that mystery event that took place at Byrgenwerth, and now part of the lecture building, right? Part of Byrgenwerth is adrift in the Nightmare. Maybe that was an influence from Rom. That's not the only explanation, but it is the one that I favor, so that's the one that I bring up. And then there's this thing here. And I want to call it a bath, because if I call it a bath, it sort of looks like a bird bath, but that also gives it a tie to holding water. And holding a vessel like this, holding a bunch of water, sort of makes sense a little bit more. Not obviously like perfect logical sense, but it makes sort of a dream logic sense that we would go from a water realm after defeating the boss that sort of spawned it, that was its impetus, to a realm that was tied to water in this very specific place. And maybe there was some ritual that took place previously that has something to do with this? I don't know. It's very unclear. But anyway, right now, we're going to do a little bit of running around. We need to run past, and also, we can now see that sort of cosmic effect was the result of the amygdala reaching down with its hand. Which is an important thing to note. And as we come down here, we enter the hidden ward, Yharnam. I called it a combination of like the joke term and the real term. Because my joke term for it is Yharnam. But the real term for it is Yhargul. Yeah, right, yeah, these enemies don't actually matter. They continuously respawn. Well, the bell ringers are alive. Bringing a little bit of the logic of the Chalice dungeons, sort of, into the world above here. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Alright, now I think... Did I already get it? I probably did and just blanked on it. It seems like something I would do. Yeah. Alright, that's what I went for. There was an item back there. Anyway, having done that, let's just make sure there's nothing else over here that I'm missing. Don't think there is. Good. Alright, and now we're going to do some of that warping around through the world that I was talking about. Alright, we're here in central Yharnam. And there's this beast here wandering around that looks like we would see in old Yharnam that appears to have broken out of this window. So, sorry, Gilbert. I'm in a little bit of a bestial fix myself, but not as bad as you. And that is the way that we get the claw mark rune. We're not going to look at that just yet, but we are going to note this is the tragic end of Gilbert's story. He has this one line, before we get his sort of on his deathbed line. He has this one line where he says, "Their strange blood bought me time. He's sort of resigned to his fate now, but at least I can die human." I'm sorry, Gilbert. I almost called him Alfred. I'm sorry, Gilbert. You did not, in fact, get to die human. Bloodborne is awash with tragedy. What can I say? Hardly anybody makes it out. Except the one person, who I think is glitched, down in the separate section of the Cathedral Ward. But we'll check that place out. That place is a little bit difficult to get to. I don't know if we'll go there. Well, shouldn't take us long to make our circuit of Central Yharnam here. Because, spoiler alert, all the responses are going to be this. There is no response, right? That's quite literally what the message is. No response. So we had the, weird sort of animal noises before. And now we're just getting pure silence. Once again, pure silence. And we can go to every door in Yharnam here. Didn't quite make it. There we go. There we go. Just run past all these people here. Wait till they stop following me. Just sort of give up. Get over to this door. No response. And because of the way that we dealt with the girl's quest over here. Oh! I was expecting this window to be dark.
You haven't by any chance seen my little sister, have you? I told her to look after the house, but she's run off somewhere. She's still quite small, and wears a big white ribbon. Have you seen her out there anywhere?
Oh, okay. That's why it's different. So all I can do now is say, I have no idea, right? I haven't seen the girl.
Oh. Okay then. But if you do see her, would you give me word? She's a small girl, with a big white ribbon. My good little sister.
And I'm a little bit skeptical of this NPC. I don't think we'll get it in this version, because we didn't hand over the ribbon. If you go a different path through this quest line, you can get a much more interesting dialogue, where you hand over the ribbon, and you hear the girl here sort of giggling and talking about how the beautiful white ribbon is all hers. And I sort of suspect this is not, in fact, the sister. I used to think it probably was actually the sister, but in the course of making Translationborn, I became much more skeptical. And at this point, I now think this person is someone who sort of sneaks into their house after the tragedy of Gascoigne's family plays out here, and is someone who's always wanted that beautiful white ribbon, and now she's lost all her inhibitions, and she's willing to sneak over here, pose as the older sister, and have you hand it over. And then once you do that, you can come over and hear her just be thrilled at the fact that she has the beautiful ribbon all to herself now. So, interesting little storyline, but I can't complete it in this version. I knew I couldn't complete it. I thought the whole quest just sort of ended if you sent the girl to Yosefka's clinic. But obviously, that is not what happened, so I'm happy about that. This door, however, no exception. No response. Okay. And those are the sort of main options around here. Yeah, I think we've got time. We're going to do it. We're going to, I'm going to warp around a bit. This is the wrong place for me to go. I'm going to warp around a bit, and we're going to explore some of the other doorways that we can knock on. Actually, we're going to interrupt that knocking on doors questline thing very briefly because there's something I need to show you. It's the red moon. This is the red moon that, by implication, has always been here. It just has been hidden by Rom the Vacuous Spider, and now the ritual concealment has been revealed. The ritual that's summoning the moon is summoning the red moon, and the red moon hanging low, right, as we saw way back with the note for old Yharnam. When the red moon hangs low and beasts rule the streets, right, are we left with no other choice than to burn it all to cinders? Something to that effect. Red moon's hanging low, beasts rule the streets, right? Everybody now is turning into beasts. We have this great proximity that is, it seems like, not just blurring the lines between man and beast, but also between dream and reality. Now, that second part, more of an interpretation on my part, but I do think just going based off of what we see in the game, it's a pretty safe statement. So it is important that now we're looking at a red moon. And I mean, there are, to be fair, like some places in Bloodborne where I think the devs just didn't remember, or there was a bug, because there are certain places you can go and the moon hasn't changed to the blood moon. I think it's all supposed to be the blood moon. It's certainly all the main places in Yharnam that you can go to, you can still see the blood moon, but I think it's Canehurst or something. If you go there, the moon will still be white, or blue, at bluish white. But again, I think the idea is that the red moon is the reality. And, you know, maybe Canehurst is in its own dream, sort of, and that's how the carriage ride works. Or doesn't work. Again, Alfred's travel to and from remains something of a mystery. But that maybe it's deliberate that the moon doesn't change in Canehurst if it's in its own, like, dream, nightmare realm, hidden aspect of reality? I don't know, I could be wrong. But definitely all these parts of, like, the main world, the moon has been revealed. It is a red moon hanging low, and that's important. Okay, back to knocking on doors. Okay. Back in the cathedral ward. Gotta take this elevator. Oh, excuse me. Gotta actually pull the lever to take the elevator. Every time I take this elevator, I think it'll be the last time I take this elevator. I think this time I'm just gonna preemptively send the elevator back down, because this probably isn't the last time I'll be taking this elevator. Here we go. There we are. And then just keep running straight past here. There are a couple people in the other section of the cathedral ward that we could check in on, but the one that I am most interested in is the one, I think, accidental survivor of all the horrors of Yharnam. Because I think the idea is that everyone at this point is supposed to be dead, insane, transformed. They, like, for whatever reason, they're no longer in a sane state. Oh, okay. I was like, where's the bridge across? It just hadn't loaded in yet. Here we are. Let's make our way down here. Not get too cavalier and take a bunch of unnecessary damage. Here we go. All right, just want to make sure I fall just right. Okay, and this is the one I can roll off of. Heal up at this point. Take a little more damage, but that's fine. Roll off the side. And here we go. Bingo. All right. And the door should be right here. Right over here. And the dialogue had been a little bit low before, so I'm going to preemptively assume that the dialogue is also going to be low. So I'm going to turn down the sound effects and increase the voice dialogue and give this a shot.
A celebration. A great night of celebration.
There it is! This guy, having a grand old time. He's the survivor of Bloodborne. I suspect that, sort of like I said before, that's a little bit of a mistake. I think that the celebration dialogue is supposed to come with Nightfall, and then at this point, it's supposed to be no response, like you get at all the other doors. But for whatever reason, apparently from 1.00 all the way through to 1.09, because I've checked this in Translationborn as well, and that's an up-to-date playthrough, even after the Red Moon, you still get this celebration dialogue. And I think it's just off by one trigger. I mean, I could be wrong about that being a mistake. Maybe we are supposed to understand that person as, like, the one person who makes it out of the insanity of Bloodborne. That this is not, like, truly the end. But, I don't know. Alright. You are all going to be a problem, so I just killed you. And I couldn't tell because this place took forever to load in. I'm glad I was a little bit cautious, because I would have just fallen to my death if that elevator wasn't there. Now we just wait for it to come down. Don't have to worry about getting interrupted by these rude people. Okay. That probably is the last time I'm going to take that elevator. Alright, and you know, we're close enough. Let's just run across. Well, run around. And talk to the last few people in the Cathedral Ward here. As it loads in around us. And just come over this way. Yep, you're very scary. Alright, I wanted to keep moving because I heard this person. Uh-oh, I dodged the wrong way. Did not want to dodge into that flame sprayer, but that's exactly what happened. Oh well. Alright, now there are going to be some enemies around here. But at this point, I'm pretty high level. So I'm not too worried. Could be hubris talking. But it's true. Alright, waiting for that shot. Yep, he can hit me, that's fine. This is my hubris. But it turns out it's not actually hubris. I can deal with you all just fine. I was a little early to dodge the bullet, but it didn't matter because I got close enough. Okay. Now, let's get to knocking on these doors. Which ones are they? Is this one? No, this isn't one. That was never one. I don't know why I would even try. Here we go. The one with the incense. Hello there. No response. And just for good record, just for good measure here. No response. So, there you have it. The Red Moon has definitely had a silencing effect on all of Yharnam. The only person who's even sort of still okay, right? He sounded kind of insane, a little bit crazy with the Great Night of Celebration. He sounds like he's raving, but he seems to have made out a little bit better than the other people in Yharnam. I guess I haven't checked the person in the hut in the Forbidden Woods, but that's too far to do. I think we've done a good job of exploring what the new state of the world is, now that we've broken the ritual secret and revealed the Red Moon. And next time, we'll see about, there's one potential loose end we could tie up here. I think we'll be going for that. We'll be going for, there's one more loose end that I can think of that we will now be able to address and get to the end, maybe, of Eileen's questline in this playthrough. There's not too much game we have left ahead of us, actually. It's kind of scary. There's a few things I want to talk about more, but we're after Rom, particularly in the base game. If you're not putting Chalice dungeons, I'm playing through them, but I'm not putting them on screen. So if you're not doing the Chalice stuff and you don't have the DLC to go to, and you're going for like the easiest ending, then there's really not that much game left. But I hope you'll join me for what there is left, right? I hope you had a good time with this episode, and will join me for the next one. For now, I'm going to call an end to my hunt for the evening, and I wish all of you good hunting.